So here in 2 Chronicles 24, eventually the work was completed. Verse 13 says, the workmen wrought, and the work was perfected or completed by them. Everything was done. And they set the house of God in his state, in its original condition. Just as it looked, almost, I'm sure there were some slight differences, just as it looked from the day that Solomon had built it. Remarkable. Of course, there were actually some improvements, because in the days of Jehoshaphat, a second court had been made. There was only one court in Solomon's days, a second court had been made, and then we read also of a gate connecting the two courts. But it was just as it was from the day that Solomon had made it, and they strengthened it, so it was strong now. And then the people, having given so generously, and the sons of Athaliah having taken away the vessels of the temple, or many of them, to be degraded in the service of Baal, they used money that was left over for vessels. The king and Jehoiada, with the money that was left over, said, we need to build vessels. Vessels of silver and gold. Vessels that were spoons and basins and whatnot. And then, with the building itself repaired, and new vessels in the temple, everything was perfect, and the burnt offerings were offered in the house of the Lord, verse 14 says, continually all the days of Jehoiada. A bit like Solomon's temple again, all restored and perfected. One last question. What about Joash, king of Judah, and all this? We saw that he had authority to prepare the temple, but why? Why did he do it? We saw that it was needed, yeah, but why did he do it? Why did he do it? He did it for two main reasons. And then after that, bad reasons. He did it to fulfill his covenant vow as king, made on the day on which he was crowned. He has a responsibility before God. He understood that. Now I need to cleanse the temple and repair it. And he did this secondly because of love for the temple. He lived in the temple. He lived in and around the temple, I should say more accurately, for 6 years. He was the only king in Israel, and later on in Judah, ever to live in the temple grounds. He was attached to that building, which had been his home, his protection in his tenderest years. He had happy memories there. And he especially, as one who'd been in the temple grounds, was aware of all the damage. And he loved that building and he wanted to see it repaired. But as we're going to see more fully next week, Joash was actually an unbeliever. That's why we read verses 17 and 19. What he did after Jehoiada died. And it gets worse. He was an unbeliever. God spared his life. He was of the line of David. He repaired the temple. But he was an unbeliever. All those pains, all those efforts, many of the things he did were biblical. Appealing to Exodus 20 and Leviticus 27, for instance, exercising his authority to repair the temple, rebuking Jehoiada for being slack in it. But for all that, and even though he lived in the temple grounds for 6 years, he was not actually a true worshipper at that temple. And he was not a living stone in the true temple at all. In our day, and this isn't a criticism of anybody here, by the way, or anybody in the building committee or anything like that, but you'll understand this to be the case. In our day, there are some people who care more for the building of the church building, the bricks and the mortar, than the church itself, which is the people. Or the doctrines of the church, which unites the people. Or the head of the church, who is to be worshipped by the people in the building. This is the way it goes in old, apostate, and apostatizing churches. When the doctrine erodes, when the glorious head is forgotten about, those names mentioned occasionally, when that goes, the love of the people can only attach itself to the building, the pews, the memories, the graveyard, but not the truth. But not the truth. And our calling, beloved, is to be concerned for our own inclusion and our children and our brothers and sisters in the church, the beloved of the Lord, in the real spiritual temple, to contribute for that. And in the service of that, building is helpful, building is good, very useful. But the people of the Lord, that's what counts, because ye are the temple of the Lord. Amen.